name's Marnie and I'd like to welcome you to Frankston City Library's FrankTALK with Sarah Bacaller, our audiobook narrator. Now, before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Frankston City Libraries operates, the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and future. I'd also like to extend that acknowledgement to the elders of any other communities who may be joining us today. Now, have you ever wondered how you become an audiobook narrator? Sarah Bacaller is an audiobook narrator and PhD student. She has narrated audiobooks for the past 4 years and has participated in solo projects, duet and group performances, many of which have been published on both Audible and iTunes. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Marnie. All right, well, I think we can pretty much go. Thanks so much, everyone, for coming. It's great to have you here virtually. I hope you're all comfortable. It's kind of nice being able to do this from the comfort of our own homes, even with, you know, the background things that might be going on for all of us. But I hope you enjoy today, and I'll try and share some interesting things with you. So, as Marnie has already said, and the reason you're here is that I narrate audiobooks. And I'm going to talk about that in 2 parts today. I'm going to, at first, talk about how I found my way into audiobook narrating and voice acting. And in the second part, I'll share resources, tips and tricks for anyone who's interested in learning more about the process. There'll also be time for questions, as Marnie said, particularly at the end, but feel free, if you think of things while we go along, to write them in the chat box. And I can either respond at the time if it's at a good moment, or we can wait to the end and I can get back to you. So to start off with, we're going to have a poll, and Marnie's very kindly put it together for me. And my question is about how often you listen to audiobooks. So Marnie will deploy the poll, she's done it, and it should come up on your screen. And you should be able to select an answer: daily, weekly, monthly, a couple of times a year, or never. And that will give us some interesting stats about the demographics of our group today. So I can see the numbers jumping around on my screen. We've got 17 out of 20 have voted, 18, 19. That's pretty good. Maybe I'm the only one. Oh, that's probably me. Vote. Yeah. 20 out of 20. That's
I'm going to end polling.
Okay, wait. Is that, I hope, poll closed. Great. Okay. This is exciting. You're a very responsive crowd. I can. So 35% of us listen to audiobooks daily. 5% listen weekly. 5% listen monthly. 30% a couple of times a year, and 25% never. So there you go. Daily is the most common answer, and after that, a couple of times a year. So some of you are audiobook addicts like me, and others of you dip your toes in the water, but maybe you're more interested in hearing about how you actually get into an industry like audiobook narrating. So I hope there's a bit of something for everyone. Thanks for your excellent responses. That's definitely a better response rate than most elections, I think, especially voluntary ones. All right, so I've discovered, I'm an audiobook addict, I've alluded to this. I've discovered that not only do they help me relax before sleep at night, but they also make a really good companion when folding and putting away washing. They make those chores a lot more interesting. And audiobooks are not a new thing. They've been around for quite a long time, but they were originally used as talking books for people with visual impairment. However, in recent years, and obviously with the development of the internet and various technologies, their popularity has skyrocketed, particularly with so many people commuting significant distances to work and finding audiobooks a valuable way of spending that time. Many of us aren't commuting at the moment. And I don't know if that means that we're listening to audiobooks less or the radio less. I'm actually listening more, I think. And these days, audiobooks have become so popular that some authors actually bypass traditional print books altogether. I'm not sure what there is to be said for that. A good book in your hands is a pretty good thing. There's nothing much like it. But some authors do choose to do that and offer their books as audiobook exclusives. It's also interesting to wonder, you know, what sort of books and what sort of stories are enhanced by being communicated orally, as in spoken, and orally, as in being heard. And I don't know, some genres might pop into your mind that, that might work particularly well for audiobooks. Textbooks, maybe not so much, but you never know. They might actually be a real advantage for students who struggle with reading for whatever reasons. So I began narrating audiobooks in 2016, and I'm often asked, how did it begin? How did you become an audiobook narrator? It's definitely part of an ongoing love or obsession with words, language, and writing, but actually I fell into it by accident. It all started with Librivox. That may mean nothing to some of you, but we're going to have another poll, and I'm going to find out how many of you have heard of Librivox and how many of you haven't. So here it is. There's 22 of us now. And you've heard of it, you've used it. No, I have no idea what you're talking about. Most of you have no idea what I'm talking about, which is actually really good because it means that I'm telling you something new and you're learning something new, and that's always more interesting than not. So our poll is closed, and 77% of us have no idea what I'm talking about. You've not heard of Librivox, and 23% of you have heard of it. Interesting. Good. Okay, thank you. It's nice being able to read the crowd in those sorts of ways because I can't read the crowd in the same kind of ways as we might if we were in person. So Librivox, I'm going to show you what Librivox is all about. Librivox is an amazing project. It's built entirely of volunteers who work for the acoustical liberation of public domain works. What on earth did I just say? I'll say it in a different way. In other words, people volunteer for Librivox and they take books that are no longer under copyright. In other words, they're in what's called the public domain. And these people work together to organise, record, edit and publish these books as audiobooks for free public consumption. They're available via an app that you can get on your phone or your iPad or directly from their website. Librivox is sort of the Wikipedia of the audiobook world in that Librivox is committed to sharing great ideas freely. But in a way, there is a cost to this, and that's actually the time and the effort of the people who volunteer. So it's a really excellent gift, really. And it's how I listen to pretty much all my audiobooks. Even though I'm an audiobook narrator, I mostly listen to free audiobooks. And I've just finished listening to a couple of George Eliot books. George Eliot, aka Marianne Evans. I'm going to show you, I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to show you what Librivox looks like because we can do that in this context. So I'll show you the Librivox website, and this is going to be a really great resource for those of you who haven't heard of it and who love listening to audiobooks. Can you see my screen now? Great. So here we are. This is librivox.org, and you can see here that you can read about volunteering and you can listen. And if you click on catalogue, you can type in, let's just think of the most famous thing that I can think of, Pride and Prejudice. Here we go. There's already how many? Seven versions, including a dramatic reading. And so these are all completely free. You can download them, you can listen to them on the app, you can find works that are narrated by one author only, so it's a solo project. You find someone you like and you like the consistency, or you can find collaborative projects where people have worked together. And there are literally thousands of books on here. And the other cool thing about it, which I'll talk more about in a moment, is that if you're interested in volunteering, you click on the volunteer tab and there's a whole lot of information there. So I'll jump back to this view now. And so this Librivox website, it also has a component where if you sign up, there are forums, and that's how everyone communicates and keeps track of all their projects. So not only do I use Librivox every day, my 6 and 9-year-old daughters do as well. They listen to books, to stories every night before they go to sleep. They won't go to sleep without them. And they've discovered some great stories, although children's books are a bit trickier to find on there because they have changed dramatically in the last 100 years. And some things that you listen to from back then, you think, oh my goodness, like that's, I would not let my children listen to that, or it's just not something that would appeal to children. But that said, there are still heaps of great books. My daughter, my 9-year-old loves the Oz series, from which the Wizard of Oz come from. There's a lot of books by Frank L. Baum, and And then after he died, the publisher enlisted another lady, he was a man, but they enlisted a lady to continue the series, and she writes more. There's over 30 Oz books, which you'd never guess just from watching the movie. And Edith Nesbit is another author who they're really into at the moment. So it was through Librivox that I began testing the waters of audiobook narration. I was at home soon after having my second daughter, and most nights my 3-year-old would climb into bed with the baby and I and would ask me to tell her a story. If my eyeballs felt like they were falling out of my head, which was pretty much every day because I was so tired, I played stories from Librivox so that we could both lie there and listen to them. The one I remember most clearly is The Secret Garden. Even though it's a children's book, its vocabulary is actually quite challenging. And I knew at the time it wasn't the sort of book that a 3-year-old would easily follow, especially without pictures. But I really wanted something we would both enjoy. So I would explain some of the plot elements to her as we would listen along, or I'd explain particular words. But I think it was really the gentle rhythmic nature of the narrating that was really soothing to both of us. And just, I guess, the images that come to mind as you're hearing these words read, even if, for her as a 3-year-old, she's not following every detail. And that's something really special that obviously has sunk in because my daughters love their audiobooks so much. I noticed when I listened to these free audiobooks from Librivox that at the beginning and end of every recording, the narrator would say, "This is a Librivox recording. All Librivox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit librivox.org." And you hear that every time, start and end of chapters or start and end of books. So one day I went to librivox.org, and as I mentioned, through Librivox, anyone can become a narrator or at least participate in the process of audiobook production, whether it's through project management, proof listening, or narrating itself. The Librivox website obviously has information for volunteers, and that includes specifying the free audio software that you need for recording and editing your audio, which is not too difficult to come to terms with. Librivox aren't picky about microphone quality, and many people use USB or headset mics, although of course the better quality your microphone is and the space that you're recording in is, the more pleasant your recording will be to listen to. For a young mum at home with 2 kids, feeling fairly isolated at the time, learning to contribute to Librivox as a narrator felt like something significant. It felt like a community to be part of and a cause to support, and it was the opportunity to learn a whole lot of new skills. So I signed up to narrate 2 chapters in a book called Culinary Herbs and Their Uses. Not sure if anyone has ever listened to that on Librivox or not, but I figured I would learn something interesting, especially because I'm also passionate about gardening. So I dived in and I read pages on parsley, otherwise known as Petroselinum crispum. And then one day out of the blue, I did a couple of Librivox projects. When I say projects, chapters, I contributed a couple of chapters to bigger projects. And one day out of the blue, I received a message in my inbox from someone named Dennis. I don't think I even knew that was his name at the time. He had a screen name. But he asked whether I'd be interested in joining a collective of voice actors and narrators in a group called Voices of Today, many of whom had actually met and done work with Librivox. And would I be interested in participating in their productions if the opportunity arose? I was surprised, to say the least, and I was very gratified. And I initially said, yes, I'd like to be involved. But then I changed my mind because I was just frazzled by looking after the kids and I was juggling so many things. I thought, oh, it's too much. However, Dennis didn't give up and invited me to participate in a production anyway. And that production is a play called The Time Is Not Yet Ripe. It's a political comedy and it's the most successful work of a Scottish Melburnian playwright who was around in the early 1900s called Lewis Esson. You learn about all kinds of interesting literary figures doing audiobook narration that you may never have come across otherwise. That project was something concrete and manageable, and my role was very minor, so it didn't take much time, and it was going to Audible, which was pretty exciting. So I said yes. After that, I agreed to be one of 5 narrators for a book called Australian Ballads, compiled by Douglas Sladen, and things snowballed after that. So you'll have heard me mention voices of today, and I'm going to show you a little bit more about them in a minute. But the voice actors and the narrators who work with this group collaboratively, and with another group that I've worked with called the Online Stage, come from all over the world, as do the participants on Librivox. I discovered, funnily enough, that Dennis was actually an Australian narrator, and he was located in Western Australia, and we soon began conversing on all things audio. Through Voices of Today, he's helped produce a huge number of solo, group, and full cast audio productions, some going to Audible to generate revenue, which helps to cover administrative costs and pays a modest amount to narrators, and very modest most of the time, and others going to the Free Internet Archive. So Voices of Today and the Online Stage have hours and hours worth of free productions available for non-commercial use. These include productions by Shakespeare, George Bernard Shaw, Charles Dickens, Lewis Carroll, Anthony Chekhov, and many more, including some contemporary playwrights. And I'm going to show you where you can find those free databases, catalogues of productions. So I'll share my screen again. And I will go to, now archive.org, if you haven't used this, is an awesome website. The website is literally just archive.org. And it has a whole lot of public domain and Creative Commons resources. It's really good for research because you can find scans of old books from libraries on the other side of the world that you maybe could never have gotten access to in your own local libraries. You know, for example, I'm studying a German philosopher. If I want original German texts, I can type them in here and they come up. But what's of interest to us, of course, is these online audiobook recordings and productions. So this is the Online Stage. And as you can see, there's a whole lot of Shakespeare at the beginning here, but there's almost 100 productions if you're into theatre, and this will be of interest to you. And there's a range of contributors in terms of there being people who are more experienced with acting and theatre, and those who are more novices but still can use the technology to produce something that can be of the quality to share in this way. So you might like to have a look through there sometime and see if there's anything you'd like to listen to. Voices of Today is the other page. Voices of Today gives not full cast audio productions. It's generally one narrator or a couple of narrators just narrating in the normal fashion, if you know what I mean, in a non-dramatic form. But there's still quite a lot of interesting texts that you might like to have a look through. So let's flick back. Here's the thing, and you might have noticed this. Nearly all of these works, and most of the audio that I've narrated, come from public domain texts. They're old books, right? They're usually at least 60 to 70 years old. That means the books aren't under copyright anymore, and that means that no one is paying us for recording these books. So unless you're hired by a big audiobook production company with their own studios and their own directors and audio engineers as well, there's a lot that you actually have to learn to do yourself to get your audio to the point where you can send it off. And that's why, for me, connecting with Dennis was so significant. It's like anything. If you find a mentor in an area that you're interested in, you learn as you go with someone on your side so you can ask questions and develop the skills that you need when you need them. And once you develop these skills and you develop a significant portfolio, which is what the public domain texts are really good for, new opportunities start to show up. Perhaps it's the author who's looking for someone to narrate their self-published book. Perhaps it's the club or the school that needs some voiceover work done. Perhaps it's connections you make in other fields of work or your hobbies where you can offer a unique skill. Or perhaps it's through your narrating networks that paying jobs come in. It'd be very exciting to get a call from a best-selling author who's heard your work and wants you to narrate their latest book. So it really is what you make of it. Growing up, my sister and I would record silly skits on cassette tapes, and yes, I'm that old, using all kinds of different accents. We grew up in a very multicultural family and an even more multicultural suburb, So different accents were part of the, I didn't even say that word right, accents. Different accents were part of the textures of our everyday life. And funnily enough, it's very funny that that's now being put to good use. I'm sure you can all conjure fond memories of reading and being read to. For some of us, that happened on our parents' knees or at our teacher's feet. And for others of us, we may have discovered that later in life. But for me, a love for words is about, well, partly about resourcing myself to be able to approach life's challenges with a bit more grace and a bit more dexterity, some more options, by growing intellectually, or simply by giving myself space to rest or relax, or something to really look forward to. And of course, we know that everyone's tastes differ, so that, you know, someone who likes one narrator might not be able to stand another narrator who their friend really adores. That's true whether we listen to audiobooks or engage with literature in any format. But I think a passion for literature and learning and books, and for the relationships we develop and the sense of self we come to as we shape and reshape our lives with words, helps us to recognise and come to terms with the fact that we're all different. So that sort of concludes the first part of my talk, which is a bit about how I got into narrating, and a bit about what it's like and some resources that you can dive into. If there are any questions now, I'm happy to respond to them. Otherwise, sorry.
I was going to say, Alex has just asked if on archive.org is if it's part of Creative Commons, can it be freely used?
Yes.
Is everything on archive.org part of? Yeah.
So you need to check the particular licensing for each particular work that you look at. There's a couple of different levels of Creative Commons. Public domain is the most open, free for all. Basically, you can do anything you want with it. Creative Commons has a range of levels. So someone might say, yes, you can use this, but you need to attribute it to the creator. Or they might say, you need to attribute it and you're not allowed to use it for commercial purposes. Or you're not allowed to change it if you use it, and then send it on in its changed form. So you do need to check the licensing for each different thing that you look at on archive.org, but it should be listed there just on the page when you go to it. So it's fairly easy to find. Yeah, good. Okay. Now, part two, the business. My two halves aren't really overly distinct. They blend a bit, but hopefully they're helpful. So I've touched a little bit on the process of audiobook narrating, how I got into it, how you might get into it in terms of volunteering, but we'll get further into the nuts and bolts of the process now. So our next poll, here's a question. What do you think is needed? Oh, we didn't do a poll for this. No, this is not a poll. This is just me asking a question. And you can type responses. Sorry, Marnie, I probably had you freaked out there for a minute. What do you think is needed to produce an audiobook narration? What do you need? You can type a word or a sentence into the chat box, and I'll try and keep an eye on my chat box. Humour, that's really good. That's lateral and creative, I like it. Quiet space, yes. A microphone, headphones, software, computer. Dead space, yeah, good one. Time. Equipment and mentor. These are excellent responses. Acoustics, yes, good acoustics. A voice, excellent. A clear reading voice. Time, fantastic. You guys are so responsive, it's excellent. You basically have exhausted my list. I had a quiet space, a microphone, good headphones. They're definitely a must, because if you've got these earbud things that I'm using right now and you listen back to your audio, there's a whole lot that you won't hear that someone else will when they've got better headphones than that. Computer software, time, voice, mistakes, preparation, practice, good diction, correct pronunciation, legal rights, proof listening, and mastering. They're all things that you will need. Mistakes, I don't know if you say you need mistakes. You do need mistakes because that's how you learn. If you want to sell audiobooks, it's likely that you'll also need a publisher and distributor. So we'll have a look at a couple of those things and we can go more into detail about them later on through your questions if you'd like. There are many factors that affect the quality and availability of a final finished audio product, like dogs barking in the background. If you've ever listened to a recording that is full of pops, whenever the reader says a P word, they're called plosives, or someone whose sibilants, like their S's, cuts right through your nerves, or someone whose voice is overshadowed by power tools or barking dogs in the background, you'll know why quality is important. Librivox is a bit of a roulette in this regard. What's great about their inclusiveness is that anyone can get involved, but it also sometimes means that you get a bung chapter right in the middle of a book that you're really hooked on, and that's annoying. Doesn't happen very often though. An ability to hear quality audio develops over time so that you begin to know what to listen out for and how to polish your work up. If I go back and listen to my first audiobook chapters that I recorded for Librivox, I'm really horrified, but it's just a sign of learning, and you have to start somewhere to get anywhere, so it's okay. Here's another question. How long might it take to record one finished hour of audio, including preparation and editing? Here we go. So, how time consuming is this job really? Oh, look at this. This is very interesting. Many people are saying 4+ hours, 3 hours. No one thinks 1.5 hours. Really interesting. Okay, so 77% of you have said it takes 4+ hours for every finished hour of audio. 18% say it takes 3 hours, and 5% say 2 hours. So those who said 4 hours plus for an hour of finished audio, you would be correct. You can, if you kind of start making money or have other income funds, you can pay someone to do your proof listening and your editing. You can do that, but that requires resources, and you'd probably be pretty serious about the game by the time you did that. So it does take about 4+ hours, and it depends how picky you get. I get really picky sometimes about my mouth clicks. You just don't realise how much your mouth clicks when you talk until you listen back to hours of yourself talking. Or your plosives, or when you stumble, it takes a lot of time. Of course, if you practice, and the better you get at narrating, and the better you know your material, the less likely you are to make mistakes as you go along, which saves a lot of time in the long run. But there's not always the luxury of that, and each project is different. So it's kind of why doing group projects like with Librivox or with the online stage, where I might be doing one part out of a whole production, is really good, because each person records their own part in their own studio. A production manager stitches them all together and tries to make the audio match and sound smooth, which is not an enviable job. I think it's very, very time consuming. But it's really excellent being able to contribute a manageable amount into really big scale projects. So recently I've been able to play the role of narrator for The Wind in the Willows, which is on Audible. I've played Oliver for Oliver Twist, and my favourite recent role has been that of Dickon from The Secret Garden with a Yorkshire accent. The Yorkshire accent is so much fun. I just mispronounced the word accent again. The Yorkshire accent is so much fun that I use it around the house all the time, but for some reason my kids find it really, really annoying. I don't know why. I think it sounds lovely. But there you go. It's just probably because it's me doing it and I'm their mum. When it comes to narrating as a whole, there are parts that are really wonderful when you're immersed in the text and it really flows. And I recently had the opportunity to narrate some of my own writing, and you just feel like you're embodying these words. Your heart, your mind, your passion and your voice kind of all collide as one. And then there are times when you might as well be reading the phone book, really, but it's all part of it. For me, probably about an hour is a reasonable amount of time to record, because voices get strained after that. My mind starts to wander, but sometimes there are things you really want to get done and you just push. As some of you mentioned, location is really significant in recording. You need somewhere that doesn't echo, and sounds have a habit of bouncing off hard surfaces, whether they're walls or your desk. or a window behind you. So you need dead space, as I think it was Marnie contributed to that discussion. When I signed up to Librivox, and you'll probably laugh at this, but it's because it's one of those, what a sort of silly coincidence type thing. When I signed up to Librivox, my husband had actually just converted our garage into a fully functional 2-room recording studio. And it wasn't for me because I wanted to narrate audiobooks. It was to do with his work in music and music production. But the space just happened to be the perfect space for spoken audio too. And he also had microphone equipment. So I was really lucky in that regard. But something of that complexity really isn't necessary for recording. Some people convert, their decent sized cupboards or wardrobes into a recording space. People who have money can buy these cool soundproof like booths that you could probably just stick in your lounge room, and you've got this cool little soundproof booth that you can jump right into and record. That's a bit down the track for me. I think I might not really even need it, but they are pretty cool. So as I said, something that complex isn't needed, but it is possible. And what makes a good audio narrator's voice? As a narrator, you're an interpreter of text. Whether you're voice acting a particular part or producing a whole book as a solo narration, that's going to affect the way you perform. Are you going to do strongly defined character voices? Are you going to slightly differentiate them, or are you just going to keep things uniform and simple? So this is a question that's for the chat box. I'd love to hear what you think makes a really good narration, or what makes for a good narrator. But I'd also like to know what you find really annoying in a narration. What do you think just doesn't work, or you go, I just cannot listen to that? This is really good professional development for me, by the way, so thanks. Now, while you're thinking about that, I will talk about, so I'll respond to some of these questions.
We do have a few requests in there, Sarah, for your Yorkshire accent.
I thought that one might come. I need something to read. Is it mostly done in chapters? Are some books read by one voice? That wasn't even very good because I'm on the spot. What does Dickens talk about? He talks about flowers. He talks about, he says, yeah, I know that. That's from the movie, The Secret Garden. You know that line? Yeah, I know that. I'm trying to think, what can I say? All I've got is my mum's Japanese. My mum's learning Japanese. Her pages are up in front of me, and I definitely can't read Japanese in a Yorkshire accent. So do you have strict deadlines with Librivox? There's a question. No, they're not strict because everyone's volunteering and people are pretty nice. So you get things done when you can, but obviously it can be frustrating when projects drag on forever because there's a person or two who don't contribute. Usually when that happens, they'll say, okay, this person's not responding. They'll give them a couple of chances and then they'll throw the chapter out to someone else, to see if someone else can do it. So let's see, yes, and Librivox is mostly done in chapters. Some books are read by one person. There are heaps of solo recordings on Librivox too. Clarity and emotion are needed for good narration. Marnie, you're welcome to jump into if you see things that you think are worth mentioning.
Carla did mention that bad accents are very annoying.
I totally agree. Which is why I find it really annoying that I did a bad job of that Yorkshire a second ago. You'll have to go on.
I was going to say, I think I'd agree with Ed as well, who said very nasally women's voices that are voiced by men are super annoying.
That's great. What else? So we need clarity and emotion, yes. You hate when there's someone, Alex hates when there's loud music at the end of chapters, wakes you up when you're dozing and breaks up the story badly. Yeah, actually, that's an interesting point because steadiness can be really, if you're listening to it to relax, even not just loud music, but if you're switching between different readers, if it's a dramatic recording, for example, and one person's like loud and forceful and you're just drifting off, that's really annoying. I find that really annoying.
Well, that's like Morag said, yeah, the two-level tones reading dramatic pieces.
Yeah, yeah. American accents. Oh dear.
As I sit here with my Texas cushion behind me.
each to their own. So Carla says, one particular book, the narrator tackled 5 different accents, not all successfully. Yeah. If it's robotic and sounds like a fake voice, yeah, and a faint accent. So another question, does it matter if the reader has a faint accent of their own? I don't think so. I mean, it doesn't bother me. I agree with the poor accents, and what I find most annoying, I think, is the kind of monotone, like when there's just not expression. Annoyances in announcing narration, speakers are ending the sentence with upward inflection. Like, that's not alive. I find it really hard to listen to that. But what's interesting about narrating is that you don't necessarily have to pass any tests to become a narrator. You can just decide, this is what I want to do. And, you know, particularly if you've got the money behind you to get set up, or if you've got connections with people, or if you start doing voiceover work, you can just start doing it. And I guess people just adjust. Once you listen to a voice, you might get used to it. For example, on Librivox, there was a lady who's passed away now, but I'm not sure where in Australia she came from. Her Aussie accent was so broad. It was sort of like if you go and watch YouTube clips from Vox Pops from like the 60s, where you hear people talking, you're like, so Aussie, so ochre. And you would think listening to someone like that read a George Eliot novel, which is what I was listening to, I think it was in Middlemarch, you would think it wouldn't work. But I started to get just really fond of her accent. And every time it was her narrating a chapter, I'd be like, oh, it's Lucy. Here she is with her broad Aussie accent. So it's surprising what you can get used to and you know, what it is that helps us to enjoy something. She was quite emotive in the way that she read. So
actually funny, we were chatting at Frankston Library to Christian White earlier this year, and he was saying the feedback he got on the narrator for The Wife and the Widow was actually quite negative. And I think it really comes down to personal choice, because I actually loved listening to her.
Yeah.
And it does go between America and Australia. So there was an accent that had to be put on, and I thought it was done quite well. And I said to him, oh, I found her quite pleasant to listen to. So it really is a personal preference, I think.
Yep, totally. And because of that, you know, if you get dodgy feedback, if you get a bad rating on Audible, you know, you can't take it to heart, because the next person you get will have loved it. So, I mean, if you get 100% bad reviews, maybe you want to rethink something about how you're doing things, but, you know, you've got to take everything with a grain of salt. So, okay, cool. So thanks everyone for your really interesting responses. I think we're on the same page about what's annoying. And probably about what makes a good narrator too. Sometimes I wonder about, you know, am I being too emotive? You know, does someone just want to listen to something a bit more relaxing? Is less more? Sometimes less is more. These are all things that you kind of play with as you go along, and it depends on the book too, of course. So I thought I might introduce you to some of my favourite narrators on Librivox. Each of these narrators also makes commercial productions, and you'll hear why when you listen to their work. But the amount of free resources that they've created on Librivox and just the hours that they must have put into doing this is quite astounding. So I'll share my screen with you again. Sorry, there's the proverbial several second wait while I actually do that. It's a couple of extra seconds right now. Here we go. So where am I? Let me find it with all my different tabs. Here we go, Librivox, that's where we want to be. So Librivox is here, and I'm going to show you my first favourite. Her name is Elizabeth Klett. Now, I have been very privileged now to have been in some productions with Elizabeth, who also does work with Voices of Today in the online stage. But if you look up Elizabeth Klett on Librivox, and hopefully my internet's not too slow, you'll see that she has narrated. It's going to be slow because she's narrated 2,000. Well, I don't know if that's how many sections she's narrated. That's how many match, or how many sections there are. But she's total matches 439. So Elizabeth Klett has done solo narratings and group performances of so many books on Librivox. So you can see here's Anne of Avonlea, Anne of Green Gables. That was a dramatic group performance. Anne's House of Dreams. So last year I listened to all of Elizabeth Klett's Jane Austen recordings on Librivox. Elizabeth Klett is actually a professor of literature in the US, and I think she specialises in Shakespeare, so she knows her classics very well, and she does a seamless transition from her American accent to her English accents when she narrates when she narrates Jane Austen. I was about to type in Pride and Prejudice again. But if you're interested in listening to good free versions of Jane Austen audiobooks, Elizabeth Klett is a great person to look up. Now, my kids love Phil Chenevere. He's another American, and he has narrated some of the Oz books that I talked about, and a whole lot of others too. He's done a lot as well. These people are very committed and do a lot of work. The good thing about Librivox is actually that the proof listening that you would usually do yourself if you're narrating a book for commercial purposes, someone else on Librivox will do that for you. So the work is actually broken up between different volunteers with Librivox, and it makes it much easier to get through your work. Though, of course, I like to listen to my things, listen back to my things anyway, because, you know, if I've left a swear word in there when I've made a mistake or burped or something, it's a little embarrassing. So Phil Chenevere, let's see, Adventures of Huck Finn, Buffalo Bill, here we go, Reddy Fox. I think my daughters have been listening to these, Jerry Muskrat, all these animal adventures too. Alice, lots of well-known pieces, but also some that I haven't heard of, which will be interesting. And here's another one my kids love, Kara Schallenberg. She actually has chronic illness. She's in the States as well, and she does heaps of narrating. My kids love her narrations. She's got a website too where she narrates a whole lot of texts. Text is such a technical word. She narrates a lot of stories and lots of kids' stories. You can see here, kray.org. And that's going to take a minute or two or three. But you get the picture. You can look her up. There we go. She's narrated some German audio as well. So Sherlock Holmes, Collaborative, Tom Sawyer, Aesop's Fables. It's heaps. She's excellent. Actually, with her website and her audiobook narrations, she actually leaves her mistakes in. She doesn't edit them out. She'll just, if she misreads, she'll just say, whoops, and then redo it. And my 9-year-old says, her mistakes are my favourite part, Mum. She really likes hearing the mistakes, you know, because I guess it shows you a person's human and they're humble. They say, oh, there's a mistake. I'm not going to hide it from you. But Audible don't like mistakes. So it depends on the context. And the other Librivox reader who I listen to a lot of is Karen Savage. She's done a lot too. So we're at 1:15 now. There are a couple more resources that I can show you. There's a good online course on a website called Udemy that I paid about $20 for. I may as well show you that because some of you will be interested actually in seeing that. I keep shutting the window and then I can't share it with you.
While you're doing that, Carla's also mentioned that Humphrey Boa is also amazing, very versatile.
Okay, cool. I haven't heard of him, so thank you very much for sharing that. And here we go. This is really useful. On Udemy, I think I paid about $20 for this course. I just did it last year because I found it and I thought that's helpful. I don't get any payment for endorsing this. I just thought it was really helpful. By Paul Jenkins, Complete Audiobook Production and Narration course. He goes through, you know, the audio program, your room, how to set it up, microphones, editing, cleaning up your audio because you need to, you know, apply some cleaning up to it in your audio program. That's really, really helpful. There's also Voices of Today has a wiki. So this, I guess, is for people who contribute to Voices of Today, but anyone can access it, and there's information about performance standard and that sort of thing and just how those sorts of things work. And the last thing is that, you know, just say, look, you can put things on Audible. Here they are. Here's The Wind in the Willows. which I don't, can you hear that?
Yes, we can.
Good. So
they disembarked and strolled across the gay, flower-decked lawns in search of Toad.
Yeah, that was me narrating that. That's a really, really fun production. Everyone's cast really well. So The Wind in the Willows was a good one to do. And you know, the way you might think, how did they actually end up, how did these titles end up getting onto Audible? Seven Little Australians, for example, that's a public domain text. I just thought, well, that would be a good text to narrate. And I went through the process of narrating it. So through Voices of Today and my connection with Dennis, we have connection with a couple of publishers, and Voices of Today sort of liaises with the publisher so that if your audio is of a good standard, you know, they can send it through and do some final mastering and that sort of thing. And that's how they ended up there. But certainly it was a process of learning and development, starting with Librivox to get to that point. So if anyone's got any further questions, feel free to ask them.
I was just reminded that we may actually have something on lynda.com. So we're going to have a look and see if there's anything about narration or audio recording or anything like that on lynda.com, which people will be able to access for free with their library membership. So if we find anything, we'll send out an email to everyone who registered.
Excellent. Cool. Yeah, and no doubt the library has a huge store of audiobooks online as well as hard copies.
Definitely. And I will plug it right now because we do have 3 platforms that you can use at the moment. You can jump on with your Frankston City Libraries membership. And if you're not a member, just jump on the website and it's immediate access as soon as you've signed up. But we have 3 apps. So we've got RB Digital, BorrowBox and Cloud Library. So each of those have ebooks and audiobooks. There's also magazines, kids' books, there's all sorts of things, and different titles on the different platforms depending on who's offering what when we go to purchase the books. So, yeah.
Excellent. So heaps of audiobooks without having to pay anything, which I'm all for, because, you know, the more books we listen to, the better, really.
Which we did have another poll there, Sarah.
Oh, did we? Did I forget another one?
We did, on how people access their audiobooks.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Shall I launch it?
Yeah, let's go for it. All right. How do you access audiobooks? Do you pay? Do you only listen to free, or do you do both? Yeah, mix of both so far. I think free, lots of free. And when you've got those resources at your fingertips with the library and Librivox, there's so much you can listen to before you have to pay. Yeah, there you go. Although if you want if you want to listen to a bestseller, you're probably, well, no, you're not going to have to pay if the library's got it. But you might like to purchase it.
I was going to say, you can always request that the library purchase it as well. So if we don't have it, you can always just ask us if we can get it. Because sometimes we can't get it. Sometimes it might be an exclusive to someone like Audible. But, you know, we can always have a look. And I must say, it's really nice when you can read a book like Kathy Lett, something by Kathy Lett, and she's the one narrating it. Like, that's kind of cool.
Yep. And that happens a lot. Actually, in Australia, I don't think there are a lot of narrators around, and often books will be narrated either by their author or by a famous actor who obviously has fantastic skills at narrating. So let's have a look at the poll.
Sorry, I got rid of it already.
Oh, no, that's okay. I can still see it.
Oh, cool.
6% pay to listen, 50% only listen to free, and 44% a mix of both. So there you go. That's pretty interesting. Can I recommend any equipment? Carla's asked. I think there's a huge and variable range in terms of price and quality, and it depends what you are wanting it for. For example, if you want to test out narrating with Librivox by doing a couple of chapters, you know, you're not going to want to spend a whole lot of money. And it's the kind of thing that you should test out and record a couple of chapters first before you spend a lot of money, because, I don't know, you might not enjoy it, or you might sort of think, yeah, I want to do this, but only as a sort of now and then thing. So, you know, what you spend would be limited. But have a look at the Voices of Today wiki, and I think there's a contact. So I'm not a massive tech head. Like, if I'm with other narrators, I don't start talking about brands of microphones like they do. But if you contact, Dennis, or even get in touch with myself, I have a website. I think it has a contact form on it. But I think you should be able to, it's just sarahbacaller.com. So it has contact details. So if you want to ask or get in touch about that kind of thing, then that's fine. Although, like I said, Voices of Today contact, Dennis knows more than I do about that sort of thing.
When we're talking about free software, are we talking Audacity or are we talking anything different to that?
Yeah, I use Audacity actually. I recently purchased some more software, but more for the cleanup. It's called Isotope RX, and it's sort of top of the line. But I work in education, so I got an education discount, which was pretty excellent. Yeah, Audacity. Look, Librivox recommends Audacity, and if you look on the Librivox, sorry, I should have said this before about microphones. Librivox will have information about the sorts of microphones that you can get your hands on for doing their sort of recording. And obviously there's heaps online. You can go on YouTube and you can see people testing out specifically for spoken word audio, different microphones and that sort of thing. You can hear what they sound like. So there's heaps of research to be done for you there. Is there anything else, Marnie, that you think we should talk about or cover?
I think that's what else did I have on my list? Let's have a look. No, that was my question. That's all right. No, not really. I think you were extremely thorough, to be honest. It's the first time I've kind of gone, hang on, do I have a question? Yeah, no, I think that was pretty much it from me.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, no, it's I must say, having looked into podcasting myself, I found the guys and the girls at JB Hi-Fi are also extremely helpful in chatting to them about, how low can you go in price for microphone before you're losing quality?
Yep.
And then, are you going too high, or, what kind of quality you're requiring? So they've been really, really helpful when I've got questions as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, cool. And I do have a pair of Sony speakers, which I don't think I paid a whole lot of money for. I can't even remember. I'm either thinking like $30 or $70, and I can't remember which. But, they're a decent enough set of headphones that you can, hear the things that you need to hear when you're cleaning it up. There was a question from Carla, did it take long after you applied to volunteer before your first session? I don't think it did. I think they're pretty quick with Librivox. And then, once you've got access to the forums, you basically can just jump in and I think first you do like a practice project where it's a run-of-the-mill thing that everyone who signs up does. It's just a short thing and you can get feedback, I think, to make sure that your specifications are all okay. But you'll be guided through that. Librivox, I found them really good in that regard. They're all volunteers, but they're on the ball. So I shouldn't say but. They're all volunteers and they're on the ball because I think they really care about what they do. So, yeah.
No, I think it's been really great that you've been able to connect us up with Librivox, because I don't think we know from the poll, no one knew that it existed. So it's really great to know that there is that, I guess, learning ground to be able to go into and tap into those people who have been doing it for so long and have that experience of, 400, 1,000 titles. Like, that's incredible.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, even if you don't sign up for Librivox, you can jump on your laptop or use your phone and record a chapter of a book or record some stories for your kids or your grandkids or, the kids who live next door, or for yourself to listen to later. I don't know if that's weird listening to yourself narrate. I find it interesting. I don't think...
I'll let you know.
Yeah, but just do it. See if you like it. It doesn't have to be something that's, commercial or I am an audiobook narrator. Just do it for fun.
That sounds amazing. Thank you so much, Sarah, for your insight today. The feedback we're getting through is absolutely amazing. I think everyone's taken something away from your talk today. And I know I'll be going, just do it. Just give it a shot. Have some fun with it, and you never know where it might take you.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks heaps for having me, Marnie, and thanks everyone for coming along. It's been great to have so many of you here and to have your excellent contributions in terms of ideas and questions. So it's been really good.
And thank you everyone for joining us today for our Frank Talk with Sarah Bacaller for Frankston City Libraries.